optimality is a concept that is widely used in economics to compare different outcomes, different economic outcomes. And therefore, we can also use it in game theory. Because as we already said, a game can have different outcomes. Depending on the strategies of the players, a game has a certain outcome. Now the question is, if a game can have a lot of outcomes, how should we think about them? Which ones would we consider better or optimal? And which ones would we consider as inferior? So we start in the definition of Pareto optimality. We start with a certain strategy profile. Again, that means that is a collection of strategies of all the players of the game. So that defines a certain outcome. It tells us what every player does. So strategy profile tells us one possible scenario of what can happen in a game. And we say that such a strategy profile, Pareto dominates another strategy profile. That means another possible outcome of the game. So strategy profile S, Pareto dominates another strategy profile S prime if two conditions hold. The first condition is here. And it says that in the strategy profile S, we have that every player, means every player I from 1 to capital I, is at least as good off, that means his utility is at least as large as what he would expect to get or what he would get if the players were all playing their strategies as prime, and the outcome therefore would be given by the strategy profile as prime. So as Pareto dominates as prime, if first all players, if S is played, are at least as good off as if S prime was played. And second, at least one player actually needs to be strictly better off if S is played as compared to S prime. And that is the second condition here. That means for at least one of the players, it could be for all, but at least for one, it should actually be the case that the outcome that originates if the strategy profile S is played, that for one player this is strictly better, it's strictly larger, the utility, as compared to the situation where the strategy profile S prime is played. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that the outcome originating from the strategy profile S is never worse than the outcome that originates if the strategy profile S prime is played. So S is never worse for all of the players than S prime. It's either better or as good as S prime. And for at least one player, it's actually strictly better. Okay, in such a situation, we also say that the strategy profile S prime is Pareto dominated by S, or S Pareto dominates S prime is another way to say it. So now the strategy profile is Pareto optimal if it is not Pareto dominated by any other strategy profile. In other words, a strategy profile is Pareto optimal if there is no other strategy profile that makes some players better off and no one worse off. Pareto optimality is a concept that we will use to evaluate different outcomes of games, different strategy profiles of games, from a society or from all players' point of view as a group. It does not tell us anything, and this is important, it doesn't tell us anything about what players will really do in a game. Because what we will typically assume is that the players care about their own payoffs. and do not necessarily, in our games, they do not take into account the payoffs of the other players. Which is what we did when we looked at whether a strategy profile is Pareto optimal.